Hello everybody, this is Dana again. I am back for the third part of our Maker Club watercolor series. This week we're going to be doing how to do a watercolor painting from a reference photo that's a more illustrative style. I mentioned in the last two videos that I really like illustrative style, which fits really well with the illustration that I'm going to use as a reference, which is one of Shel Silverstein. We also just finished National Poetry Month, so I thought it would be fun to do something based off a poem. I'm not a huge fan of poetry, but I'm like a little kid. I love Shel Silverstein. He's my favorite poet of all time. And I'm going to do the illustration that accompanies my favorite poem of all time, which is called Invitation, which I think is actually the first poem. Yeah. So what I'm going to be doing today is showing you how to copy an illustration that you like and make a painting out of it. So I'm going to take this candlestick, which as you can see is just black and white. I'm going to do it in pencil on a piece of watercolor paper, and then I'm going to color it in with watercolors in that illustrative style. Illustrative style is, it's, interpretive for everyone. It happens to be my favorite style. Some people might think it looks a little sloppy, but I like it when paintings have like blank spots, when they're a little bit out of the, colored outside the lines and things like that. So if you would prefer a neater style, feel free to do a neater style. Okay, so I'm ready to start my painting, and the materials that I have here are pretty much the same as my other videos. I've got a pencil and an eraser because I'm going to do the drawing in pencil first, make sure I like the way it looks. Then I'm going to go over it in my thickest micron marker, which is the 08. And then I've got my two favorite watercolor paintbrushes. So this I'm going to use to paint the actual candlestick, and then this brush is really good for doing the background. So I have kind of an idea of what I want to do. I want to do the flame like a red and orange. Then I want to do the candlestick possibly like a light pink or purple. And then I want to do the base in a light gray. And then I think I want to do a navy around the outside so it kind of looks like it's glowing in the night. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is start copying the picture. Okay, so I'm finished doing a pencil sketch of what the picture looks like. Now, it's not the exact copy because we're keeping in mind that we're painting over this with watercolor, so not all the detail is going to look that great. And I also made my candle holder come up a little, come up a little bit higher rather than this one that goes off to the side, just to make space. So I'm happy with the way that that looks, and now I'm just gonna go over it in the marker and maybe add some scribbly lines just to make it look a little bit more kind of messy and lived in, and then I'll go back and actually go over with the watercolor. Okay, so I've finished now going over my picture in the marker. and it's had a couple seconds to dry because I want to make sure that the wet paint doesn't smudge anything. Now, if you want to, you can go over it, and if you have like some pencil marks that are there, you can erase them, but to be honest, I don't mind leaving them. I think the paint kind of goes over them anyway. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my paints, and my plan is to do some red and orange wet on dry. If you remember that technique, that means I'm not going to wet the page first here for the flame, and then maybe a little bit of pale yellow around the outer part of the flame. Then I'm going to do like a lavender for the actual candle. Or actually, you know what, maybe what I'm going to do is I'll do like a milky white color for the candle, and then I'm going to do a gray for the candle holder, and then I'm going to give that some time to dry, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to use the wet on wet technique throughout the whole background in order to get that blue color. So I'm going to start off here just by mixing the colors that I need. So we've got our yellow, and then I want an orange, and a little bit of red. And it's okay that they're mixing in the tray because that's what we want eventually on the paper anyway. So actually I said that I was going to do wet on dry, but I think what I'm going to do instead is wet on wet so that it spreads a little bit better. So I'm going to start with the yellow because we always want to start light to dark. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some water on my brush, and I'm just going to lightly go over the area around the candlestick. And I'm intentionally coloring outside the lines and making it a little bit messy looking. All right, now I'm going to go in with my yellow, and I'm just going to color over everywhere that I put that water. And it looks like I didn't give the pen enough time to dry because I'm getting some black marks, but that's okay. Next, I'm going to take my orange. I'm going to mix that just in the middle here. And finally, my red in the very center. If you do too much, you just dab the excess off your brush and then go back in and touch it up. All right, that looks pretty good for the flame. So now I'm going to mix my color for the stand, or for the actual candle. And if you remember, I said a few videos back that you never mix white with a color to lighten the color, and that's still true. You never want to mix white. If you want a lighter version of this, you don't mix white. You just mix more water and it'll get lighter. However, if you wanted to change the color a bit, that's when you mix the white. So I actually want this brown to be a little bit more creamy, so I'm going to mix the white in with it, and you can see right away that the color is different. I'm also going to mix in a little bit of some darker brown in here. Oops, that was more like a black. I'm going to warm this up a little bit with this brown. There we go. That's the color that I'm looking for the candle, but I want it to be paler. So now I'm going to mix water into it instead. And that's exactly the kind of milky gray creamy color that I want for the candle. So I'm going to rinse off my brush. And just like I did with the flame, I'm going to wet the paper around the candle, intentionally making it a little messy. Intentionally going outside the lines. And then I'm going to grab my brown All right, and now before I do this bottom part, I want to let this dry because I don't want the bottom part to be to blend with that. So I'm gonna let this dry for a couple minutes and then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna do the stand. Okay, I've actually come back because I realized that while I'm letting this dry so that I can paint the stand, I actually just want to paint the faintest halo of yellow, like a bright yellow around the candles so that it looks like it's giving off a glow. So I'm gonna take some of this yellow here, which is kind of like a lime yellow. Mix a little bit of regular in, that's perfect. Mix some water in. And then I'm just gonna, whoops, dab that off. I'm just gonna paint kind of to the side the candle strokes rather than swipes. And then I'm gonna go in with this bright yellow. And now I'm just using the very, very tip of the brush, which is quite thin, to really stretch out those strokes and make them look like a candle flare. Okay, so the middle part of our painting is still a little wet, but I'm gonna continue on down here anyway, because if it blends a little, that's okay. I just didn't want to do it when it was completely wet because I didn't want to worry about it blending too far in. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and mixed the color for the candlestick, and I wanted it to be a dark gray, but I didn't want it to be so dark that you couldn't see the lining underneath it. So what I'm going to do is, this is still a little dark, so I'm going to make sure that I wet the paper really, really well so that I can spread it out if I need to. So I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. That way I give this even more time to dry. And like I said, I'm making sure my paper is nice amount of wet because I don't want it to be so wet that the water pools, but I want it to be wet enough that it's going to be easy to spread the color around. Okay, I'm going to go in with my color again from the bottom up. All right, and now I'm just going to get a little bit more of the darker color on my brush, make it a little bit darker. Dab it off and just go in here with it. Whoops, that was way too dark. It's for some dimension. All right, and now I'm gonna let that dry and then I'm gonna go in with the background. Okay, so my painting isn't totally dry, but that's okay because I'm actually, when I do the background, I'm gonna stay pretty far away from this area anyway, just because I wanna make sure that it doesn't blend. And this time I mixed the gray off screen last time, but this time I'm gonna show you how I mix the blue for the background, just so that you can see my process in mixing a color, because it's not quick. You know, in order to get the perfect color, you don't just mix, you know, one or two colors. You might have to mix a couple. You might have to keep playing with it, adding to it, starting over. So I want the background to be kind of like a navy blue, but still bright. So I'm gonna start off with some blues. I'm gonna take this blue, which is pretty bright. And then I'm gonna add in a darker blue that isn't as bright, and mix a couple different blues together actually. That's pretty good in terms of brightness. So now this is where it gets tricky. I said that you never add white to a watercolor to make it lighter, and that's true. But sometimes you do want to add black to make it darker. Usually to make a color darker, you just want to make it more saturated, which would mean just adding more and more paint. However, I want it to be not just, in that case, I think that's just going to make this too bright. So what I'm going to do is just take a small amount of black, because my black is very pigmented. And you can see already that has darkened it, even just like with a little bit. So now I'm gonna have to keep experimenting, keep adding these brighter. Sorry, my filming got cut off there by an alarm. But I'm still on the same process. I'm still mixing some blues, some brighter blues, back into this mixture to make it more of a navy. And I'm actually quite happy with that. I just don't want it to be quite this dark. So I'm gonna do what I usually do. First, I'm gonna rinse off my brush, and then I'm gonna go into some clean water and just add that water in to make it lighter. And that's exactly what I'm looking for, because this is actually going to dry lighter anyway. I'm just gonna take a tiny sliver, a bit more of this bright blue and add it in, and that's perfect. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make sure my brush is really, really clean. And I've switched to this brush because this brush holds more water. And since we're doing a larger area, I wanna make sure that I don't have to keep stopping to dip in the brush to wet the background. So I'm gonna take clean water, and I'm gonna start wetting the background, making sure I stay clear of the areas that have paint on them. And then I'm gonna do it one section at a time. I'm gonna go with my blue. And as you can see, I'm getting my workstation pretty messy, which is why it's usually good to paint on like a newspaper or something like that. But this is pretty easy to wipe down, so I don't mind. So I'm actually gonna come back to this first side again, and I'm just gonna go over it just to make that color even more saturated while it's still a little wet. I'm gonna do the same to the bottom. All right, and that's it. Quick, easy, and then you wind up with a personalized handmade painting of one of your favorite pictures. I'm gonna let this dry, and then I'm gonna insert a picture of the completely final dried painting in the end, so you could see what it looks like and what the colors look like when they're dry. But yeah, my advice to you is just to keep practicing with it. Next week we'll be doing something other than watercolor painting. We're going to be making an origami jumping frog, but still continue practicing your watercolor. If you find that your paper, like mine, is, you know, bubbling and pilling and stuff like that, that's okay. That's because this is student grade paper, and that's perfectly fine for a beginner. Don't be discouraged by that. Just keep practicing, and then when you get a little bit better, you might want to invest in some artist grade paper, and then your paintings will look even more amazing. So keep practicing. If you want to show us what you make, we have a Padlet where you can upload pictures of the things that you make. It doesn't have to be what you make for Makers Club. It could just be anything that you make. If you've done a drawing that you really liked, if you've made some kind of craft that you want to show off, make sure with your parents' permission you upload them to our Padlet, or you can upload them to Instagram and tag us in them. Our account is at EBP Library Kids. Thank you for watching through this whole watercolor series. I hope that you found a new hobby out of it, and I hope that you enjoy doing your own watercolor paintings. Bye!